How are all of you counselors?
Good. Thinking about double or talk show first.
Happy Tuesday, Council President.
Can you turn down the volume?
I think the volume should be turned up. I mean,
are we leaving our hats on?
I left my festive scarf.
I'm staying with my
festive shirt on.
Yeah. Not taking my shirt off.
The hat back on.
Yes, Counselor Nog, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, Keelan, let me know when we're good on time.
We are now live.
Thank you. I will call this Tigard City Council and Local Contract Review Board meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Here.
Councillor Newton.
Here.
Council President Lube.
Here.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councillor Nog.
Here.
All right, I will ask that you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Keelan, if you could please put the flag up on the screen, and I will ask everyone to mute themselves so they can participate on their own. All right, thank you, Keelan. Staff or council, any non-agenda items?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. None for us.
Okay. Let's see. We'll move to public comment. Anyone that wishes to make public comment may do so by calling 503-966-4101. For general comments, you should call now to get in the queue. And we'll move on to follow up to previous public comment. Assistant City Manager Nyland.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I do not have any follow-up to report because we didn't receive any public comment at the October 26th council meeting, but fear not, I do have some fun facts. So Thanksgiving is the second favorite holiday among American adults, second only to Christmas. 88% of Americans surveyed by the National Turkey Federation will eat turkey on Thanksgiving, and 46 million turkeys will be eaten next week. According to the U.S. Calorie Control Council, an average American consumes 4,500 calories and 229 grams of fat on Thanksgiving Day. That is a lot of caloric intake. So you're probably asking, what are the most popular side dishes across the country? Mac and cheese and mashed potatoes tied for first place for the most popular side dishes. Green bean casserole came in third, followed by stuffing and or dressing, and rolls rounded out the top three of popular side dishes. So that said, thank you for your time and happy upcoming holiday to all of you. That's my report for this evening.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Nyland. Appreciate that. And we'll move on to Tigard High School Student Envoy, Elise Butera. Are you with us tonight to give us an update on Tigard High School activities?
Yes, I am. Hello there. So first off, my Vice President Jamie Toda and I are beginning the process of forming a student council at Tigard High School, and the student council's job is just to review the events that our leadership class puts on and just give input for within the student body. And then within our leadership class, the different committees are currently working on hosting a canned food drive, joined with our NHS group at Tigard High School between November 30th and December 3rd. Also, our HR committee is working with the Gay Student Alliance at our school to have an affinity week for them, November 29th through December 3rd. And then our activities committee during Veterans Day went and delivered cards and flowers to the local retirement homes in Tigard.
Well, thank you for that. That sounds excellent, and you got a lot going on and getting back into the swing of things after COVID has changed distance learning. So I'm glad you're all back in it. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to an update from the police department. We have Commander McDonald with us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Good to see you all this evening. I have 3 slides. Keelan, I think if you could share those, that would be great. I wanted to just touch on a few things from October, and you have the dashboard that was sent out, I believe. So if we have any questions on that, I'm happy to talk about those as well. But wanted to hit the Levy update. So we are at a point where we've hired more into Levy positions than what the Levy had, but that doesn't mean that we have 9 officers. Unfortunately, we had an officer that was not successful in their field training process, and so while we have hired 9 officers, we actually only have 8 in those positions because one of those we had to let go, because even though we're still trying to hire officers, we are not reducing our standards. The community would expect us to keep those high standards, and we still do have some open general fund positions that we're hiring for, but the Levy positions have been filled. And the biggest challenge that we have right now is getting spots at the academy. We have an officer that will be starting on the 29th, and his spot at the academy is not until the end of March. So even if we hired a brand new officer, like we will in a couple of weeks, that officer won't get to go until March, and actually probably not until April at this point, because the March class is now already full. So as you can see, we're facing some of those challenges with getting new officers to the basic training class. Next slide, please. Wanted to talk a little bit this evening about some of the efforts that we've made in the downtown corridor, talking about some of our houseless challenges that we've been facing. I know that council is aware of some of those challenges, but we spent 192 hours of high visibility in the downtown corridor, and that number of 16,500 is the amount of overtime expense that the department had in the month of October for those efforts. The photo that's included there, I wanted to include that because that's an encampment that's along Fano Creek. The photo you see there was prior to last week when we had the floods, and that's no longer there. So this is one of the reasons we have a big concern about this vulnerable population, because they're in an area often that is of concern to us, to flooding, and that happened last week. And fortunately, we didn't have anyone injured, but all of those people lost all of their belongings. So this is a concern for us as a department. And of course, all of you are aware as a city that we're trying to focus some efforts on. So that was something I wanted to just highlight really quickly. And then next slide, please. Have some really excellent outcomes from some efforts of a few of our officers. So on the left there, you see Officer Mastrich and Officer Brett. On the 22nd of October, they responded to a call at a local hotel. A gentleman had been working out at the hotel workout facility, came back, said his shoulder was bothering him. He wanted to take a shower, went in to take a shower. A family member thought he'd been in there a while and found him that he had collapsed in the bathroom or in the shower. Officers Masterch and Brett were able to pull him out of the shower. They applied the AED and did CPR, and medical was able to get there and get him stabilized and get him transported to the hospital. So their efforts saved his life. We carry AEDs in all the patrol cars, so that's a perfect example of one effort. And then Officer Northcote and an off-duty Beaverton officer did CPR on a gentleman who had been working out at a local martial arts studio. He collapsed. CPR was started, and he actually was. They brought him back, and he was actually conscious when they transported him to the hospital a few minutes later. So a couple of really awesome outcomes from some of our officers in October. And if there are any questions about the dashboard, I'd be happy to see if I can address those at this point.
Counselor Newton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commander McDonald, at the last Public Safety Advisory Board, when you talked about the hiring of the Levy officers, I thought you all did a good job explaining what you were going to do regarding training, since we have this gap between officers coming on board and not being able to join the academy. So if you could just in a few sentences tell the council and the community what you told us at the Public Safety Advisory Board. I just thought that was very proactive and forward thinking of our police command staff to make good use of that. So I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure, you bet. So a few of the things that we're doing is one, we have an in-depth orientation process that we do, and we're adding to that. And some of the things that we're doing is we're going to have new officers make community connections with some of our community groups and things like that to really get them oriented into the Tigard community. So before they even go to the academy, they're going to start getting some of those things. And then we're also going to just start sending officers into the field training process in a more, I don't want to say cautious, but in a slower way than we would normally, because they won't have that baseline of training. But does that cover basically what you're thinking, Councilor Newton?
Yeah, I thought it was important to have people understand the commitment the department has to getting our officers connected with the community as quickly as we can. So the MAT and all of our different community segments. So I thought that was great. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions? Commander McDonald, thank you.
You're welcome,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Mayor. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to a report out from the Tigard Area Chamber of Commerce. Jessica Love, are you with us?
I am. Good evening, Council. Nice to see you all. So our Leadership Tigard class met on November 9th, so last week, and they learned about history, culture, and diversity. They got a walking historical tour of downtown Tigard. They also got to tour the Muslim Educational Trust, which is usually a fan favorite. It's a pretty fascinating and amazing system that we have in Tigard. We have our Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee meeting coming up this Thursday, where we're going to be going over our advocacy plan for 2022. And then we have a ribbon cutting for AFC Urgent Care on December 17th at 10 a.m. The Tigard Chamber is currently hiring for our Chief Executive Officer and then also a Chamber Growth Manager. So if anybody's interested, they can find information on our website. And then we just want to thank everyone who supported our silent auction. We raised over $3,000 for support for Tigard Chamber programs and services that we offer. So we're super excited and honored about that. Networking events every Thursday at 7:30, virtual and in person. Check the calendar for more information. And then we have Holiday Happy Hour presented by Selfie World PDX on December 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. We're super excited to be able to bring that event back again this year. For the farmers market, we just want to thank everyone for the support for this past season. Thank you to the City of Tigard, the streets team, the police department, the parks department, everyone that's helped with the market this season. We look forward to next season, hopefully being able to be back in full swing with our Market Sprouts Kids Club program, our music at the market, our community booth, and then more vendors, hopefully, because we won't have to do social distancing again, hopefully. And then we are currently hiring for the market manager role. So if anybody's interested, they can email myself at Tiger Chamber. And then for Tiger Downtown Alliance, we have Shop Local Bingo happening. And that is going in through November 27th, which is Small Business Saturday. And then the holiday tree lighting will be taking place this year on December 3rd. We will be releasing information soon on if it will be a virtual event or if it will be in person. Any questions?
So that, Jessica, can you just confirm, you're saying that will become available? When will that information become available, but whether it'll be in person?
Very soon, hopefully.
Okay.
We're still in the process of figuring out what our opportunities are for doing it in person, if there is opportunities, and if not, then we will make sure we will do something virtually like we did last year.
Okay.
So hopefully by the end of the week, I'll be able to give a more solidified answer.
All right. Where should the community go to look for the definitive information on that?
It will be available on the Explore Downtown Tiger website and also on our 3 social media platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and Twitter. So all of the above.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the council?
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Good to see
Nice
you.
to see you all.
Let's see, we'll go to written public comment. City Recorder Krieger, I don't believe there were any earlier today. Is that correct?
That's correct. We didn't receive any comment.
All right, we'll go to phone-in public comment. Keelan, do we have anybody on the line?
There are no callers at this time.
All right, we'll move on to item or area number 3 on our agenda, and the first item in that area is to consider a proclamation proclaiming November 27th as Small Business Saturday. And this has become an activity that we really try to promote and supporting our business community and particularly small businesses in Tigard. Is there a motion or discussion?
I'm happy to move and to approve proclaiming November 27th as Small Business Saturday.
I'll second the motion.
Second that.
What was that, Councilor Goodhouse?
Was second.
Okay. Your audio is, Council President Lube, you look like maybe you were having trouble with his audio too. Is it not just me?
No, I can't hear him. It's very jumping in and out.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Councilor Goodhouse, just as a heads up, you may need to wait and, okay, you're gonna add your headphones.
Does this work better?
It does so far.
Okay, I'll use headphones then.
Okay. All right, City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Counselor Nog,
Yes.
Counselor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Counselor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Absolutely, yes. And so the motion passes. We will proclaim November 27th as Small Business Saturday. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tigard City Council and Local Contract Review Board have items on the consent agenda. The consent agenda is used for routine items, including minutes and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements. Information on each item is available on the city's website. In the packet for the meeting, these items may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Council members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Tonight, we are reviewing and approving minutes from 4 different city council meetings and also local contract review board action awarding a contract for Proud Ground. So is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda, Mayor.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote.
Counselor Goodhouse,
Yes.
okay. Counselor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Okay, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda, consider resolution appointing a new deputy city recorder. City Recorder Krager, staff report.
Okay. Yeah, the section 22 of our charter states that in the absence from a council meeting, the mayor shall appoint a clerk of the council pro tem who can act in that capacity. They have all of the authority and duties of the recorder in order to assure continuity of the job functions provided by this office. And Jesse Raimundo was hired. He started here mid-June, and he has been in training to learn all the duties, responsibilities. Just an awesome experience in 2 different cities of California, working out very well. I'm very pleased with his technical ability. He can really help me in that corner. He'll be scheduled soon to be attending minutes and attending meetings, taking minutes, and we'll learn the election process. So we're very happy to have him here. And our staff recommendation is that you approve the resolution.
And Jesse, I see you're on the line. Good to see you this evening. And
good to see you as well, Mayor and Council.
I've welcomed you to Tigard before, and when we've been recording some of the fireside chats, but good to see you. And I know the rest of the council may, because of COVID, may not have seen you a lot or at all. So just quickly get you to, do you want to give just a really brief introduction for the council?
Sure.
And
Thank you.
And the community?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to work with you all. I look forward to continue serving the city of Tigard and assisting council and fellow teammates in any way that I can. My name is Jesse B. Raimundo. I worked for a couple different cities in California, one being the city of Fontana, California, and the other being the city of Anaheim, California. So 2 very different cities, different scales, but I've been in public service since 2012, started in the Parks and Recreation Department for the County of Los Angeles, and kind of worked my way through the different government entities, and looking forward to bringing my skills that I picked up and sharing any talents that I can share with you all. So feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions that you have or anything that I can help out with. And I'm very happy and excited to be here and help out with that. So,
well, welcome. Council, is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 21-38.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just welcome Jesse. Glad to have you on board.
All right, City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 21-38, a resolution of the Tigard City Council appointing Jesse B. Raimundo as Deputy City Recorder.
And a roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right, resolution number 21-38 is adopted unanimously. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is consideration of filling a Black Student Union vacancy on the Public Safety Advisory Board. Management Analyst Ramos, staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. Thank you again. My name is Eduardo Ramos, Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office and Liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board. So I come before you tonight with a nominee to fill the seat of, it's a voting seat on the Public Safety Advisory Board representing the Black Student Union. The student is someone you know well. It's Elise Boudra, and she was nominated to fill the seat by outgoing Representative Abdi Mohammed as he went off to pursue higher education. And she has also been endorsed by the current BSU leadership and the advisor. So I've had the pleasure of connecting with her and getting to know all of the activities that she leads at Tigard High School. And she has accepted to represent the group on the Public Safety Advisory Board. So with that, I would invite Elise to talk a little bit about herself, and then you can proceed with the nomination process. Elise, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am. Hi. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Yeah, my name's Elise. I'm the ASB president at Tigard High School and also the Tigard High School envoy here in the city council meetings. I'm also involved in my school's choir program, and I am the vice president to the BSU as well.
Well, thank you. I will say I had to turn my volume up to hear what you were saying. I was able to hear it, but barely. So were other members of the council in the same situation? Okay. Elise, is there, I really want the community to be able to hear from you. Is there any way that you could either
can talk
speak
louder? Is that
okay?
better? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll talk louder. Well, hi, my name's Elise. I'm the ASB president at Tigard High School and also the Tigard High School envoy here on the city council. I'm part of my school's concert choir and their correlation small ensemble, and I'm the vice president of the BSU, and I'm involved in a few other clubs here at Tigard High School as well.
Well, Elise, thank you for stepping up. This is an immense responsibility for our whole community, and I think for you are one of the youth voices, or will be one of the youth voices on the Public Safety Advisory Board. So thank you very much. It's a big commitment, and we are all indebted to you for stepping up. So thank you. And is there a motion?
Mayor, before there's a quick motion, I
Sure.
just need to make a quick statement from the city attorney and the city manager. Just to be open and transparent, just want to share that Elise is an employee of mine, but the city manager and the attorney have advised that there's not a conflict, and I will be voting.
All right, thank you. Councilor Newton.
Yeah, really quickly, as the council's liaison to the Public Safety Advisory Board, I really want to welcome you, Elise. I think your perspective is going to be so valuable, so important. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to work with you, and look forward to getting to know you and hearing your perspective on all the issues we're working on. So please don't be shy. Thanks.
I don't get the impression she's shy. That's
Me
my,
either.
that's my sense.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to work with you all as well.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Elise D. Butera to fill the Black Student Union vacancy to the Public Safety Advisory Board, and welcome, Elise. Very excited to have you on board.
I'll second the
And
motion.
I'll second that.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded twice. City Recorder, conduct a roll call vote, please, starting with Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse,
Yes.
Counselor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. All right, the motion's adopted unanimously. You're appointed, and congratulations and thank you for committing to this work.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is a joint meeting with the Budget Committee. City Manager Reimer.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, and Budget Committee members for being here tonight. If you give me 1 minute, I'm going to share my screen. Is that, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. And so tonight we really want to start the conversation for fiscal year 23 budget, which is somewhat incredible that we're at the point that we're talking about that. It was only 6 months ago when the Budget Committee was together to talk about the fiscal year 22 budget. And so tonight it's really a high level, the purpose of the meeting is really to have a high level overview, high level discussion on what we experienced in the fiscal year 22 budget process, as well as some key items moving forward. Before I do that, I would like to just introduce 2 new people to our team. We are in a time of transition, as you know. I want to start by thanking our finance teammates, Steve and Liz, especially for their efforts and the work that they've done to date, and then introduce Emily Trish, who's one of our new assistant city managers, joining Kathy Nyland as our second assistant city manager. Emily's responsibility is our investment and infrastructure portfolio, which is public works, community development, facilities, fleet, and our finance team, which also includes oversight of our courts. And so Emily comes to us from the city of Portland, and we're excited to have her on day 5, I think, in her time. So you'll get to know Emily along the way. So Emily's the first person I want to introduce. Welcome again, Emily. And then the second person is, because of the transition and because of the amount of work that we have in our finance area, we're also working with a firm called Management Partners that does work nationally across the country. And Mr. Steve Toller has joined us to assist us in a variety of ways. And tonight he'll talk to you about some of the new internal service funds that we are developing. So I just want to say welcome to Steve as well to the team. So with that, at any time, if you feel like you have questions, please just let me know, Mr. Mayor, councilors, or budget committee members, and then we can take those questions in or have a conversation. This isn't really supposed to be just a formal presentation, but more of a conversation with all of you. So we thought we'd start by talking about the fiscal 22 review, just to kind of get us set for the next year's budget process. As all of you may recall, ultimately, we adopted a $392 million budget for all of our funds. You can see the breakdown there. I think it's important to recognize, especially for a city of Tigard size, our operations is about a $90 million budget expense, and our capital improvement program just for the year is $78 million. So if you look at that, the amount of funds that we dedicate from different funding sources to our capital projects is obvious when you drive around the community. And as our community grows and expands, so does the need of our infrastructure in many different ways. I want to just take a second to talk about our annual revenues. As you saw in the previous slide, roughly about $150 million we generate in our revenues. Many people, as we discussed last time, feel that the majority of that is property taxes. In our case, it's a much smaller percent. As you can see, from a dollar standpoint, it's about 23 million of our $150 million. So because of that, we rely on several different funding sources that we've broken down here and categorized for you, just to get a sense and recall where do our revenues come from, so that we can make the investments in our operation, maintenance, and capital programs for the benefit of our community. So switching gears from the dollars and cents of the budget to really the starting point of our budget, which we want to talk about in a little while for next year, is what are the focus areas? And so in fiscal year 22, we had the 4 priority areas that you can see there: improving our systems and implementing our strategic plan, continuing our response to COVID-19, as well as implementing our efforts in anti-racism plan, as well as our Public Safety Advisory Board, which we just got a new member. Congratulations a couple minutes ago. We also then took that obviously into the adopted budget book, which is hundreds of pages long. Last year, we started to use a new software to allow that book to be a little easier to navigate. And as part of the survey of the budget committee last year, I think there's mixed reaction to the document for the sake of being able to review it as a budget committee member. Some of you expressed that you really like the navigation tools. Others expressed that a hard copy is nice just to be able to make the notes and get to the page you want and do some of the things to prep for the meetings. And so we're mindful of that as we move forward. And then the new document that we introduced was the budget in brief, which is a much, much shorter document that just tries to take the large document on the left there and reduce it down to something that our average resident or others can read and just get a sense of what our budget is about. And then those that really need more information can go to the large budget book. So I mentioned the budget committee survey. I wanted to pull one of the questions, in this case it's question 15, and this is where we asked, what guidance would you give us? Would you give me as the city manager, and what guidance would you give us as the city to look at our future budgets? And you can see a few of the different comments here, and one I want to focus on is the third one, at least for right now, is the focus on not adding services and how do we sustain our services to make sure that we're continuing to provide the quality that our residents want. And so you're going to see that theme as we get into next year's budget as well, that is one of our key focus areas. So I appreciate the comments that were provided last year, and it's helpful as we take all of these into consideration to inform what we do for this year. So with that, Mr. Mayor, maybe I can just pause, and if there's any questions or comments about fiscal year 22 review before we move on to the next section.
I think that's good. And I also want to make sure I'm tracking all the budget committee members that are actually on the line. I think I saw Tim Cadman, I saw Chris Bentz, Jim Knowlton, I think. And then were there any other budget committee members? Because I'm trying to manage the participants and make sure that everybody's included. But are there other budget committee members that I did not call on that I missed in the list?
This is Siobhan Chandler.
Oh, good to see you. Thank you for speaking up. I did not see you in the list, but I'm glad you're here. Anyone else? Okay, so budget committee members, either counselors or citizen members, any questions in the first section that the city manager just reviewed? Or comments for that matter. City Manager Reimer, you want anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything, if there is anything, otherwise we're happy to move on as well.
I'm not hearing anything or seeing any hands, so why don't you move on? All
right, perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And so the next section is really looking at the budget priority for fiscal year 23 that we are proposing and recommending. At the end of this section, we are going to ask for some discussion and potential concurrence with what we're proposing here. So to this year, we are recommending one budget priority. So the budget priority, which is to improve Tigard's long-term fiscal health. And as I was able to join the organization last year, kind of mid-cycle, working with the finance team, the leadership team, and others. This is one of the things that we started to talk about, and we addressed it in our narrative throughout the budget document for fiscal year 22. And I know it's been talked about even before then. And so this year, for many reasons, we feel that this is really the focus area that we should have. For the general fund, I think this is the slide that really pulls this all together for us. So if you're looking at this is the general fund financial forecast. So you can see it goes out from this current year of 2022 all the way through 2029. And later we're going to get into talking about the reserves as a specific topic, but this is to demonstrate what the current forecast is saying for the general fund. And so if you just look at the 2022 compared to 2029, you can see the ending fund balance goes from 31.5 million to about $17.5 million. And that is obviously of concern. It's something I know has been brought forward before. And because of this is a key reason, we think we really need to spend time not only in fiscal year 2023, but what does it look like, and what does the investments we make then, how does that impact 23, 24, 25, 26 and beyond? And right now, as you'll see in the next slide or so, I'll talk about this a little more, but this was just one example of why we think it's important to focus on our fiscal health. It's also important to realize that we're showing you the general fund right now, but ultimately this is for all of our funds. And so from our water fund and other funds that we have, we want to ensure that that fiscal health is top of mind in all that we do, and the decisions that we make and the proposals that we ultimately bring forward to you next spring. So to add a little more to that, what does this mean? What will the team be talking about? So tomorrow we'll start our introductory or kickoff meetings with our budget teammates from throughout the organization. We'll have 2 of them this week. And as we talk through it, we want to add a little specificity. And so this slide is really meant to start to provide that. And so ultimately looking at a hold the line budget. And so not making new investments unless they're the highest priorities of the community. And those highest priorities are identified in our strategic plan, our adopted goals, and then some of the key initiatives that we've started. And we've talked about the Total Tyler system, I think, as a great example of that. It's a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project that we're in. And so looking at those key things to drive what we do. At the same time, talking about implementing some financial best practices. We already have some internal service funds, and we're going to talk about those in a little more depth in a couple more sections from now. But looking at other internal service funds that we can bring forward that really can help in relieving some of the volatility on an annual basis of our budget. Looking at prudent reserve policies that we also are going to talk about here in a few moments. And then getting back to that financial forecast that I showed you. Today, we're not saying that is the forecast, but what we need to do is ensure that we go through an in-depth ongoing analysis of our general fund as well as other funds. And as an example of that, in just a couple short weeks from now, myself, the finance team, our assistant city manager, Steve Toller, who I mentioned, we're going to come together and spend a half day really looking at our key high-level assumptions that drive that forecast. We may learn that the general fund will look exactly the same after that, and that obviously drives that need for fiscal health. Or we may learn that some of the assumptions need to be revised, which could improve our financial outlook. But until we do that, we don't have that answer, and we'll bring that to you in January when we meet again. And then the last thing is to apply our community lens. We talked about this last year coming out of the City Council's advance, what we call the 5 E's, our community promise of equity, the environment, the economy, engagement, and excellence. And so in all that we do, we want to ensure that those 5 things are resonating. So our vision is laid out in the strategic plan. So always looking at this to ensure that we align our highest priorities with the vision. The council goals that I mentioned, our response to homelessness, our COVID-19 response. We're developing a community resiliency plan, and then our parks and recreation system plan. I talked about our community promise already and the role that will play in how we evaluate and look at our goals, and ultimately the proposed budget that we bring forward that we think advances those in a very sustainable way, as well as moving forward some of the top priorities for the community and for the city council and for the budget committee. So I'll pause here again, mayor, councilors, budget committee members. The first thing we'd like to do is have a conversation, or is there agreement with the committee that improving Tigard's long-term fiscal health should be our budget priority for this year? If so, that is what we will continue to carry forward. So as we return in future meetings, we will continue the conversation around this priority. So Mayor, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
All right, and it looked like Leah Voigt also joined, so I just wanted to note that. She joined a few minutes ago. Okay, so we got a lot of people to try to get input from, so I'm going to start with, I'm actually going to go round robin. Councillor Shaw, any comments or feedback on City Manager Reimer's question?
Yeah, thank you very much, City Manager Reimer. I appreciate the review and the fiscal stewardship. and I don't have the budget directly in front of me, but there seemed to be the largest drop between years 2027 and 2028. Is that because there's infrastructure at that point that needs to be either purchased or built out? Or is there a particular reason? And I can go back and look at the exact details. I just don't have that full breadth of years in front of me.
Councilor Shaw, I appreciate that question. That is exactly the type of things that we want to answer when we come together here in a couple of weeks. You start to build off of what's driving some of the numbers that you're seeing today. And so we'll have a better answer coming up in a short while.
Terrific, thank you.
All right, I'm going to alternate to citizen members. So, Mr. Knowlton?
No, I mean, I think this sounds great, and I agree, because ultimately, if we don't take care of our long-term fiscal health, then none of the other priorities really are going to happen. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess the big question, the only real question I have, and I'm fairly new to the budget process for city, but is when we say we're going to improve Tigard's long-term fiscal health, and we have a few line items in the other slide that we talked about, is like, are we going to have specific targets that we say at the end of the year, yes, we accomplished the priority that we had set forth?
Thank you. I appreciate that comment, and nice to hear from you. Yes is the answer for that. Right now we don't have the targets, but as we build this out, that's exactly what we'll want to do, so we know if we're achieving what we set out to do.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, Council President Lube.
Thank you. You know, just as a finance person, I think, especially looking at, I know we don't have reserves for things like putting money away and knowing that we're going to replace a vehicle and those sorts of things, and that's coming out of operations. And I think it's really important for the stability long term to be able to have that, so we don't have those jumps when we have to replace things. So yes, I think making sure we're making smart decisions for our fiscal long-term health is really good. And I think just a deep analysis of, rather than taking the current budget and, you know, just copying it over to the next one and seeing what changes are, looking at it with a fresh perspective of how would we build it from the ground up, or are these the services that we should be providing looking forward, I think is a really helpful way, rather than just copying and pasting the previous year and putting in inflation, you know, those raises and those sorts of things. Just a fundamental look at, you know, from the ground up rather than just copy and paste would be my preference as well. Which I know is a big ask. It's a big budget, so I'm not expecting total miracles and mountains. Just looking at it with a fresh perspective would be appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Council President Lube. I can say, I think to that, you know, those are the type of things we want to do. We also recognize, and I think your last comment appreciates this, is, you know, this is a multi-year look as well, right? And as we move towards fiscal health, it doesn't happen just next year, but it's going to happen over multiple years with multiple different strategies and things that you're suggesting. So thank you for those.
All right, Mr. Bentz.
Yeah, I'll say I do agree with the question that should be a priority to improve Tigard's long-term fiscal health, but it always feels like a perpetual priority. So I guess, you know, it'd be nice to see some hard metrics and, you know, an end date. Say, yes, we're sustainable. I know it's asking a lot, but that would be nice to see. I think that's all I got.
Thank you for that. I can say that is what we want to do, is exactly that. I know in my conversations with the mayor and others, this has been, like, as you referenced, something that's comes up for multiple years now. And so we really want to, you know, find out if there is that critical need. If there is, let's start addressing it. And if there's not, let's ensure that the funds are available to make some of the key investments that the community's been wanting for a number of years. So absolutely to the points that you made.
I was just going to emphasize that I actually agree with Mr. Bentz that this has sort of been a perpetual sort of goal and always hanging there, but what it means in specifics. And, City Manager Reimer, to the discussions you and I have had about how we seem to have a very healthy reserve, and it always seems to remain that way regardless of what decisions get made, is just sort of an interesting sort of part of the whole mystery to unravel, I think, in my mind. But maybe mystery is not the right word, but it's, having been at this as a chair of the budget committee or on the city council for the better part of 15 years, it just seems like a sort of continuous dialogue that has the same ongoing narrative. And I feel like I'm one of the only people, maybe with Councillor Newton, who have been through all of that for that long. So it's just a little odd. But Councillor Newton?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the points I would make have been covered in other ways. I think this is a good priority. I agree with some of the stuff that the mayor just mentioned. I think metrics are important. We need to know, as we're moving through this, are we chipping away at it? How are we doing? I think it also will allow us to ensure that the basics are covered. We want to make sure that the basics that our community expects to have us deliver on, that we're doing a good job in meeting those needs. And thinking on a hold the line budget, when we talk about something like the strategic plan, there's ways we can advance that, for example, investing in more sidewalks or trails or whatever, and not invest in new programs that are related to the strategic plan while we're trying to hold the line. So I hope, as we're looking at moving forward in some of these important priorities, that we're looking at it through the lens of, we need to make sure that we can cover the basics and that we are advancing this budget priority. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I think to that last point, that investment in our infrastructure is obviously a key piece of this, and that's where a lot of the concerns that I know I've heard in my almost 10 months here now have come up with sidewalks and park assets, et cetera. And so we'll absolutely be looking at that. And to the mayor's point on this has been a trend that you've seen for a number of years. One of the things you want to understand is, we've said it is going to be an issue in the coming years and then doesn't happen, and try to understand some of the whys in that. Why are we forecasting that way? And then why is it that we are actually ending up in a much better financial position, which obviously is where you want to be. But at the same time, when we have forecasts showing that the numbers are continuing to drop, coming forward with a proposed budget of major investments in, say, infrastructure like parks and sidewalks, those are things that we're cautious of. But if the funds are there, obviously it's a much different conversation for the budget committee and ultimately the council to have. So thank you for those.
And just to clarify, I'm also talking about maintenance of, existing systems. That's really important too, and not necessarily investing too quickly when we're struggling to maintain. And I think looking at making sure we have a long-term fiscal health, as we look at that, I'm hoping we can get to a point where we're comfortable that we've got a maintenance program, our methods and programs to continue to maintain our assets are in place, and we don't keep struggling with that. Because to the mayor's point, my history with the city, that seems to be an ongoing battle. So.
Yep, thanks,
you, City Manager.
Yep, thank you. And we will be, especially that relates to our park assets and park operations and maintenance, as we bring forward the system plan for adoption, we're going to be bringing forward some of the ways that we are doing that. So you'll hopefully have a confidence that that's being taken care of. So more to come on that.
All right, Mr. Cadman.
Thank you. Yeah, just a few comments. I completely agree that fiscal responsibility does always need to be front of mind. Having said that, I do also think we need to be careful about cash hoarding. That's not necessarily what we're doing here, but once you get outside that 3 to 5 year window, assumptions can get pretty fuzzy. And if you're always predicting a cliff in year 7 or 8 that never really arrives, you might have a tendency to want to collect and hold a lot of cash. And my belief is that citizens, when they pay their taxes, they don't want us to spend money frivolously, but they probably do expect that it will be spent on meaningful things. So they're getting some value for those dollars that they're giving up. So I want us to be mindful of not just being overly cautious, which I tend to be quite conservative myself and always consider worst case scenarios and plan for those. But we do need to be careful about probably not overly hoarding cash in anticipation of all of those potential worst case scenarios.
Thank you for those comments as well. I think you've just hit on the balance that we need to strive to achieve. Is exactly that: is how do you continue to meet the needs of our community and the many things that we've talked about, while at the same time looking out for a number of years. And so there's the art to that balance. Obviously, there's a science to it as well. But I think you've just hit on one of the key things that we need to try to solve for. So when we have the next conversation, we can share that with you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, Youth Councilor Nog.
Okay, I think that it's important to start creating like a long-term and sustainable fiscal plan. But I think one thing that could be beneficial is adding some sort of reserve dedicated to the impacts of environmental changes. I think it's important to prepare for those events beforehand. And there are ways that we can like predict things that could happen, like wildfire seasons. I doubt that it's going to stop. So maybe allocating money so it's not a surprise to us when these things happen.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that. I always appreciate your focus and attention on the environment and our community for that sake. I think when we get to the next section, when we talk about reserve levels, right now we have 4 categories that we'll get into it. I think that would be a good place to maybe discuss that again on the purpose of our reserves. So appreciate the comment on that.
All right, let's go to Ms. Chandler.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm generally in agreement as well in terms of needing to focus on our long-term health as a city. I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is that we are a small suburb of among other suburbs in this general area. And so when we think about things like our parks and rec and some of those, I think many of us compare where we live, Tigard, to perhaps maybe not an LO, but certainly a Beaverton or some others. And I think there's a stark difference in terms of what some of those services are. And I think it's something we need to be mindful of, because you can't simply just pack more people in. There need to be things for them to do and ways to build community. So I think that needs to be something the city council needs to be, committed to and interested in to make this a full-fledged community. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And I personally can't agree more than with the way you said it. So I appreciate that. And those are things that hopefully you'll start to see operations and maintenance as we bring forward the capital improvement program as well. Be able to see where we think those priority investments should be to hopefully achieve what you're suggesting.
All right, Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes. I think that if anything, COVID has shown us in the pandemic of what, looking forward for the fiscal health and where we need to be. And as other members have mentioned, really take a look and see what we need to have for how long of a period and to cover what is really important. I know we have a emergency reserve that's there that's for transparency, but we don't know how long a period we need to have it and what areas to cover it. And I know throughout, whether it's this around here, neighboring cities, or just across the nation, taking a look and see what other practices cities are using. That way we know, do we have X dollar amount of operating expenses for a certain amount of period of time to be, really get us through something. And then that way we know when we have to use it, we kind of go less amount. But I think right now, if anything, we see that it can be other things besides recession or things like that that can really take a city off its financial health.
Thank you, Counselor. I think as I mentioned to Counselor Nog, the same thing. This is going to be exactly what the next conversation will be as we get to reserves and talking about those, because I think it's fair to say, as everyone saw in the slide with the general fund forecast, we have very healthy reserves today, and so it's really looking out to the future. And we'll share some of the comparative information here in a few minutes.
All right, Ms. Voigt, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent.
I agree. I agree with this as a budget priority. I think that any comment that I would have made has been brought up by someone else, so I have no additional comments at this time. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else that wants to say anything further, or did I miss any members of the budget committee? I think I got them all, but this is a little unwieldy with so many people that I'm trying to facilitate here, so. All right, City Manager Reimer.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate you going around to every member and allowing them to make comments. So I think that's important. So we will continue forward down this path. As I said, we'll be talking with our teammates starting tomorrow as we start to the formal development process, and then continue this conversation at our proposed next meeting in January that will lead us into the spring meeting. So more to come on this, and trying to answer many of the questions that were posed today. So the next part is talking about the process. And so some of the comments that we received in the survey were ensuring that we had enough meetings, even if we had held an extra meeting, just to allow an opportunity for the budget committee to discuss whatever you feel is important. And so we've heard things like that. And so tonight what we wanted to do is share the proposed meeting schedule, because that's always important, because this committee only comes together during a certain time of the year. And then also, if there are other comments about the process or things that you'd like to see that we can hear now, so we can ensure that we incorporate them into the coming months here as we work toward the June consideration for adoption. So as you can see, really highlighting the bold, the 4 meetings from here would be a meeting in January. Again, we'll talk about that at the end of this meeting on what the focus would be, as well as then more the formal budget committee meetings in April and May. Right now we have 3 meetings scheduled for those dates. And then that's one of the key things we want to know, if the budget committee feels like that's a sufficient number of meetings, or if there's other things that you think should happen as budget committee members between January 11th and the April 23rd meeting, because there is that period of time where we're going to be in the budget development. And if there's something that the budget committee would like to see, it'd be good to know now, so we could schedule in a time for a meeting or whatever that may be. So with that, Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if there's any input by you or others, it'd be helpful at this point.
All right, this one I'm not going to do full round robin. So if you want to speak, please make me aware of that. Anyone have feedback or comments on this proposal of the schedule? All right, I see a lot of heads down and no hands up. So City Manager Reimer, I think you can take that as agreement. Oh, Councilor Newton.
Sorry, I had trouble raising my hand. Real quick, I just wanted to say I appreciate, although I don't think I suggested it, but I appreciate the extra meeting. I think some folks felt a little rushed last year. So I think it's important to have that meeting set aside for the budget committee members to have discussions, and I feel like if there's issues that come up that we really want to talk about in more detail, we have that time, and then the team also has the time if there's things that we need more information on. So I appreciate the additional meeting.
Thank you, Councilor.
Council President Lube.
Yeah, Councilor Newton reminded me, I think last year we were having some really good in-depth conversations, and there kept being references to, like, we're not on schedule anymore and we're behind schedule. And I think it would be great if we could possibly create a little bit more flexibility. So what, like, we tried to cram into all one meeting, maybe split that over 2 meetings. I just feel like it was prohibiting continuing to have productive conversations around these subjects, because we were feeling like we had to cram it all in and we had to abide by this agenda that was in this schedule. So just, I think, allowing the opportunity to have those conversations without the pressure of squeezing it all in would be beneficial.
Thank you for that, Council President. I think, moving forward, what we're hearing and what we heard in some of the surveys last year is we will focus on having those meetings 2, 3, and 4. Try to potentially items for meetings 3 and 4 might be lighter agendas, but meet both times, so it allows unused time, I guess, during those meetings. I think as you're getting to allow the conversations to occur. So I'll take some of the I wouldn't call it credit for jamming them in last time. We tried to pack that second meeting so we didn't have to have a third one. But I understand your point that it's better to provide the opportunity for additional conversation or follow up from us. So appreciate that.
I think a little white space in the meeting schedule would be appreciated.
Yep.
This is hard. There's a lot going on. Just the ability to think and or to realize, like, if you forgot something at one meeting, you can still bring it up at the next one or follow up or whatever. So other comments, citizen members, I don't see any hands raised. If you want to unmute yourself and say anything, now's your opportunity. All right, City Manager Reimer.
All right, thank you again for that input. And so just to summarize, we will plan on holding at least these 4 meetings, as well as some of the other opportunities like the open door meetings, as we can do whatever we can to make sure you're familiar with the budget when we start the formal conversation. So thank you for the input on that. So now we're going to talk about the general fund reserves. This is a follow-up from last May. Councilor Goodhouse brought up this question, and what we had suggested and the budget committee agreed with was coming back to all of you, but this time with a follow-up on our reserves, and then get any guidance from you at this point. And this will play right into some of the other conversations that we've already started here about our budget priority, about our long-term fiscal health, but hopefully it'll provide a little more context to our reserves. So walking through this, obviously there's multiple reasons for having reserves. One of the things that you've often heard is our cash flow needs is one of the key things because of the timing of some of our revenues. So that's key. You've also already heard from some of the budget committee managers or counselors talking about mitigating some of our risks in the future. And then there's things like our debt issuances where we may have covenants in those documents that require us to have certain level of reserves or coverage, as it's called in other ways. So we've talked a lot about the general fund, and we'll probably focus on that this evening, but it's also important to realize that strong reserve policies are also important for our enterprise funds, for our capital funds, and for debt service. And so those are all things that we're paying attention to, though we often are talking about the general fund because of what services it delivers, as well as the funding sources. So as a reminder, our reserves, as you saw, are broken into 4 different areas, as you can see on the left-hand column. So we have our cash requirement and reserve, and that is equal to 3 months or 25% of our general fund expenditures and transfers out. And then we've already talked about the purpose. But so that is one where we've identified a percent, which is common, either as 25% or 3 months, as other cities will say, is a very common number that you'll hear here as well as other places in the country. The emergency reserve fund that Councilor Goodhouse referenced, we have a flat $1 million in that. That's separated out from the cash requirement. And then we have also the service level reserve, as well as the unassigned reserve. So in this case, we have identified 4 different areas. Many cities will have this as one reserve that is kept for all of these purposes. And then oftentimes you'll see a number like 40% or 33% or something for that, rather than just 25 for your cash flow. So to put that in context a little more, we did a quick survey, thanks to Steve Toller for his work on this and his team of other Washington County agencies. And we wanted to show you the 2 key ones. One were the operating reserve that we talked about, our 25%, and then the emergency or contingency reserve. And you can see a variety of different percents, but when you compare ours to those, we are at the top percent. Many of them are lower than us in terms of that. So I think that's a strong fiscal policy we have, and one of the reasons why we have healthy reserves is because we strive to have that 25%. And then we also have the $1 million in emergency, where you can see Tualatin has emergency reserve of 15%. What's interesting there, though, if you look over one column, the general fund operating reserve is only 10%. And so what they've really done is broken it down into those 2 areas, that 25 that we have. they've broken it down into two separate. So because even though they have the emergency reserve of 15%, it doesn't mean that their reserve in those two areas is a stronger policy than Tigard's because of the way that we historically have operated in these areas.
Steve, can you go back to that slide? I think there's an important question asked there. Is the Tualatin description of that cumulative, or is it 10 and then another 5 to get to the 15% of appropriations? It's not 25%, is it, between the two?
Yeah, I believe it's together it's 25%. It's 10% in the general fund operating reserve and then 15% in the emergency. But Steve Toller, any clarification on that?
What City Manager Reimer said, yes, it's 10% for the base operating reserve plus an additional 15% for the emergency contingency reserve.
So that number looks pretty similar to our 25% then.
It does, yeah, except that you have the $1 million flat amount for the emergency contingency reserve on top of the 25%.
May I move on, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sorry. I just thought that was
fine.
Important. The way it was written up there was, at least to me, not necessarily super intuitively clear. So I thought it'd be good to be clear.
So now I'll bring us back to our general fund reserves. You saw this same chart, but looking out till fiscal year 2029. And so now to put this in numbers, as we talked about our cash requirement reserve, which is on the bottom now, you can see that continues to grow as we comply with that 25% number that we have. You see our emergency reserve complying at the $1 million. We did obviously use it, but it's been replenished since then. And then the undesignated reserve and service level reserve. And those are the two reserves that you see dipping into the future. And so those are the ones that we'll want to understand overall why our reserves are being depleted at such a fast pace in those outer years, if that is actually the case. So that is just the intro to reserves. I know, as I mentioned, Councilor Goodhouse was one that asked that this be brought back. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you at this point for any comments or conversation that the Budget Committee wants to have about our reserves.
I just want to make one comment about the service level reserve, because the way that it's, I think, was characterized and or presented may reflect just maybe not a full understanding of what was intended with that in the last couple of years as we passed the public safety levy. And the concept was, and actually some of the decisions we made as a city, that was intended to allow us to have a fixed amount in the levy that was consistent over a 10-year period of time, such that we did not have to either increase the levy amount at year 5 nor cut services at year 5 when the levy had to be renewed. And so I guess I just want to make sure for Steve Toller and for a relatively newer city manager that is fully understood as that's how that was supposed to operate. I'm not necessarily saying the numbers here suggest it is or isn't, but just so you know, conceptually, that was a very specific decision that was made in the last couple of years that predated both of your involvement. So just to clarify that.
And that's a good clarification, Mayor. That's exactly the type of things that we're going to be asking and wanting to understand, is those type of decisions. What's the purpose of this, as well as many others. There's a long list of things that we're going to be talking about, but that's exactly what we need to understand.
Okay, and there members of the leadership team were around for that, so I think they can be helpful. While they weren't in the finance area per se, I think some of the finance staff can probably should be able to articulate that as well. But that was the subject of a lot of conversation and sort of decisions by both the Budget Committee in the last 3 or 4 years and the City Council. So other members of the council want to add to either that or any other comments, and then citizen members as well? Anything on the reserves? Okay, City Manager Reimer, I think you're free to go to your next section.
All right, we have one more section that we want to talk about. Just a time check. It's 7:43, so I think we're right within the time frame that we're trying to achieve here. So this is talking about some of the best practices. I mentioned that we've already we have internal service funds here, and we really want to build upon that. Council President Lube referenced them in some of your comments earlier about the volatility and starting to fund some of our assets, our fleet and facilities, and IT. And so I'm going to have Steve Toller kind of quickly walk through some of the work that he's been doing with us on this to give you a sense of the things we'll be bringing forward in the proposed budget. So with that, I'll turn over to Steve Toller.
Great. Thanks, Steve Reimer. Again, good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. We've been doing a lot of work with other cities throughout the United States, Pacific Northwest, here in Oregon, as well as in Washington, on this area of internal service funds. And the things that you're already doing are great in terms of using internal service funds for what they're really intended to be used for, which is to track goods and services that are shifted between departments kind of on a cost reimbursement basis. And what you're already covering are really the things that are on the flank for the most part, operations, and this is what you typically would see and what we've seen with other agencies, where you're, capturing fleet maintenance costs and facility maintenance, information technology, all of that, as well as some of the liability and risk management issues, especially in the area like self-insurance that you're currently already having an internal service fund to help allocate those costs appropriately throughout the operating departments. It's the middle area, I think, that is a little lack right now in Tigard, and which is why the city manager asked us to, as part of our support through this time, to assist you in, is really identifying what are the set-asides that should be made to really understand what the true costs are of providing services to the community. And that's in the area typically that we see in other agencies of fleet and vehicles, also equipment, building systems, some of the other equipment and furniture and fixtures like the library sorter that you have, a great thing that Halstead, kind of oversees in the library, and some of the other technology needs, of course, that help support providing quality services to the community. So Steve, as we go to the next slide, what you see here is basically this concept of what best practices are. Did you advance this slide, Steve?
I'm trying to, but not wanting to. It might quickly advance now, so.
Okay. Let me just talk through it as it's trying to catch up. I didn't think it was going that fast. Basically, what we see as best practices, and in some regards, it's, Council President Lube, what you were saying about that volatility issue, the lumpiness, as I like to call it, over time of, huge, $300,000 vac jet trucks or things that happen over time. It's a best practice to set aside those monies, understand what those costs are on an ongoing basis. And that's basically the approach. And the other element that really helps with this internal service fund is the things that you've been talking about in terms of priorities, which is the fiscal health of the agency, of the city. And this concept of fiscal sustainability planning needs to incorporate what are the cost of providing services on a core level in the community. And that includes the tools that your staff need to provide those services. And so we're going to be looking at, a methodology that incorporates what those replacement costs are, that, ranges from, the big picture of what are the assets that we're really trying to set aside for, down to, what is their remaining useful life and what is the replacement value, and ultimately come back to you with a proposal that's incorporated in the budget in terms of how to address that. And so we'll be reviewing the existing practices in terms of not only asset inventories, but also the other operational costs that go alongside that to make sure that those are fully encompassed. We'll be identifying some opportunities based on best practices and the work that we do throughout the United States with other agencies, as well as then, identifying what those analyses are of how you might be able to use some money to seed some of these, or a plan to be able to set aside those monies over a period of time. So we'll be incorporating that in this budget and for the fiscal 23 proposed budget. We'll be bringing back a presentation to you and to the budget committee members in that April-May timeframe that's part of the budget proposal. So with that, I'll yield back to Steve and any questions you might have.
Thank you, Steve. Very high level overview, as you heard from us here. The intent is to introduce this item tonight. But also, if there's questions, comments, ideas that you may have, this is also going to lead to that fiscal health of ours. But as Steve also said, building our internal service funds is one thing, funding it then is the second part of it. And so we're confident in the building of it, and then it's going to be looking at all of our priorities once again, and are we able to fund the new internal service funds to a level that ensures some of the sustainability into the future. So we'll a keen focus on this. But Mayor, I'll turn it over to you and see if there's any comments by you or others on internal service funds and going down that path.
I will check with others. I think this, just makes good sense from a practical standpoint, or practical accounting and financial management practices. So, and we've got members of the council who are more expert on this. So I will look to Council President Lube in particular and her expertise in this general area. And who's got other comments or questions? Council President Lube.
I mean, I sort of feel like you called me out, so I should probably speak on the topic. I think it's just good business and good practice. The volatility of up and down, knowing predictably, having a schedule and in service and knowing when you need to make repairs or anticipating replacement. It's just going to continue to provide that stability long term, which I think goes into the original goal of looking at creating a sustainable budget over time. So I think it's a good move, and it's something that, it's too bad we didn't do earlier, but it's, the best time to save is yesterday. The next best time is today. So go ahead and setting us up for future stability is a good idea.
All right, citizen members of the Budget Committee, anything? Or other members of the council? All right, Mr. Reimer.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council President Lube. Like I said, really just a chance to introduce it. So as we bring forward the actual internal service funds, we've started with conversation with all of you at this point. So this gets us to the last item, which is our January meeting preview. And some of the key items are to introduce our new budget committee members. Myself and Council President Lube are going to be spending Thursday afternoon and into the early evening having interviews with many members of the community who are interested in this, serving on the budget committee. And so we'll bring forward those members, as well as elect our new budget committee chair and secretary for the coming fiscal year. We will then get into a little more depth in the current financial forecast. This is going to be an iterative process where between now and then we're going to be able to make some positive steps, hopefully in the right direction. It'll probably be able to start to identify and answer some of the questions that have been raised tonight. I'm not saying we're going to have all the answers at that point by any means, but we'll start to get a sense where we think that is heading, as well as some more update on the internal service funds. So we'll bring you along, try to bring you along during that process. So as we get to the proposed budget, you understand the mechanics and the building blocks to each of those as we start recommending funding proposals and opportunities. And then, as always, we'll look at the budget calendar and ask the same question that we asked tonight: is does the future meetings meet your needs? And is there other things that you would like to see between now and the next scheduled meeting? In this case would be in April. So we'll ask that question throughout the process just to ensure that we're meeting your expectations and needs as a budget committee to support our efforts, and obviously to make sure that the community's highest priorities are funded appropriately into the future. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking time this evening to have this meeting. We felt it was important to pull everyone together and just to start that higher level general conversation before we get into really the nuts and bolts of the next budget in fiscal year 23. So I appreciate it. And I also just want to extend the offer if there's times where budget committee members would just like to have one-on-one conversations with me or others. Please don't hesitate to ask. We don't need to wait for the proposed budget to come out. We can obviously have conversations along the way, so we're happy to do that anytime. So Mayor, I'm going to turn that back to you at this point.
So Councillor Shaw's got a comment or question.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to City Manager Steve Reimer for all his work in the Budget Committee, and also to Council President Lube. As one of the newest City Council members, I really appreciate the transparency, the additional time to meet about the budget, and the additional items such as putting in the internal services fund. So thank you very much. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you. Citizen members or any other members of the council, last parting words before we move on from the joint meeting with the Budget Committee. All right. Thank you all, citizen members. We'll see you in January. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to, we have no non-agenda items. We'll move on to administrative report. City Manager Reimer.
Well, good evening again. Nice to see you. Just give you a quick, brief administrative report before you go into your next item. So just a couple things. Once again, I had a chance to introduce Emily as our partner ACM with Kathy, and just want to once again tell all of you, welcome her. And I know she's going to be reaching out if she hasn't already to have an opportunity to meet with each of you one-on-one and get to know you as our counselors and mayor and understand what your motivations are and where you'd like to see us continue to go. So welcome again, Emily. Just a few things. It's been a big week for advancing the council's goals. Every step forward is a step forward. And so in each of these, or at least in 3 of them, we made progress. And so first, with your implement an actionable person-centric regional response to homelessness, our CHART group met this afternoon, I believe, which is the Community Homelessness Assessment and Response Team, known as CHART. This is where business leaders, service providers, council rep, Councillor Shaw was there, some of our teammates, obviously Halstead and others were there to really start that community conversation on how we work together to move forward in Tigard, as well as how does that mean, how do we work together regionally to work together to support those that are experiencing homelessness. There is the goal, as we talked about before, of also making sure that we have individuals that are experiencing homelessness as part of the conversation and understanding their ideas, their needs, their wants, and how we move this forward. So thank you to Councillor Shaw for your involvement and support on that. The second is talking through the $250,000 of RAFT 3 funds, which came through the ARPA program from the federal government. We received 8 applications for the $250,000. That committee is going to be meeting this week as well. I believe maybe Thursday, if that's right. Maybe Wednesday or Thursday or next week soon to review all those and ultimately make the funding recommendations for those. So with 8 applications, I'm sure the community needs are being demonstrated once again, and appreciate the City Council's support of putting the money there. Talking about our community resiliency plan, or BOLD community resiliency plan. Another step forward this week is we've launched our climate webpage, which is our community resiliency plan and our climate hub. And so just another way of showing progress, as well as being able to be open and transparent to all of you as the community as we move forward with that important goal as well. So many important things happening. Obviously, the other goal that we didn't directly talk about was our support of Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation, but we are moving that forward as well. Had some really good meetings recently, and so we are hoping to bring council a revised document in the near future, and we'll give you some more updates on that to consider for adoption that meets the needs that you expressed in our last meeting and other conversations we've had. And just a couple more notes. Obviously, things continue to happen at the library. Right now, there's a variety of programming opportunities. The Grimstad's Welcome Ranch History Walk is happening through November 30th along the Fennel Creek Trail behind the library. You can learn a great deal about that family. We've updated the library pages on the Tigers website, on our new website for the library. Obviously, it's a very popular place for our website as well as our community to gather at the library. We had a great opening this week, and thank you to many of you who were there to help open our newest business in Tigard. And so that's going to be an exciting time. And I've already heard from people how happy they're like, what a great use of space. Like, what a great idea, and what a great use of space, and what another way to have a welcoming library that's really supporting our community. So kudos to all of you, our economic development team, Halstead, and the library team for that. And then the last one I have is there's a Let's Talk Housing Equity virtual event on December 9th from 6:30 to 8:30. I see the mayor nodding his head because he's been asked to participate in that, as well as the Washington County Authority Executive Director, our Metro Councilor, Garrett Rosenthal, and our representative, Kasha Lawrence Spence. We're gonna, just one more way of talking about why housing is so important and why, and the things that we are doing and can do to continue to support our community and others through housing programs. So a lot of things going on, as you know. This is always just touches base on it, but we continue to appreciate your support and ensuring that we have the resources to make many of these things happen. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Mayor and councilors.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the administrative report from the council? All right, City Manager Reimer, thank you for that. And with that, the Tigard City Council will go into executive session to discuss the performance evaluation of a public officer or employee under ORS 192.660 subsection 2I. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. Executive sessions are closed to the public, and the council will adjourn after the executive session. So with that, we are recessed. Good night, Tigard.